Alright, welcome back YouTube. This is part 2 of the projectile system. So if you guys already watched part 1, you already noticed where we left off. You can see you can shoot projectiles, and obviously you can change it to use for like different types of projectiles and whatnot. It's pretty good. But in this part, we're going to be showing you guys how to do the server side of it, because as you can see now, if I were to use the skill on this client, I can see everything working correctly. And if I were to go to the server, you can see here, and I use the ability, the server doesn't actually see anything, which is good because you don't want the server to actually handle like effects and whatnot. But this also means if I had a second player in the game, the second player wouldn't be able to see the ability, only because it's running on my computer, my machine. So I'm the only one who's able to see it. So we want to fix that. So that's what we're going to be doing in today's tutorial. If you guys would like to see a part 3, get this video 200 likes, because in part 3 we're going to be doing basically raycasting for like guns and stuff. So it's going to be kind of similar to this raycasting, but we're going to be using it for like specific guns, right? So you'll be able to shoot at like very specific points on like a surface and whatnot. So if you guys want to see that, 200 likes, and I got you guys with that. Anyways, without further ado, make sure you guys drop a like and sub, and let's get straight into part 2. Alright, so as you can see, if you guys watched part 1, you already know this is where we left off on part 1. So this code currently runs on a client. There's a couple of things we're going to want to change. We're basically going to use the exact same code, except we're going to be changing a few things. Main things being anything where we handle effects and like moving physical parts, we're going to remove to make it so the server only handles pure positions. So to help visualize this, picture it like this. When you're running the skill on the server, all the server is going to see is just positions. For example, if I were to go to this part here and go to its properties and search a position, you can see this is current position in the world. So the server is only going to handle the current position of the part, and then it's going to send the information for the client to basically do the module on itself by itself. So the server is going to hold the pure position, and then using that position, it's going to fire it to the server, so to the client, telling the client to start the projectile at this position. Then the client will do its own simulation of the projectile actually moving until it lands in the end position. And then since it's from the server, we can fire it to all clients, and then it's going to make it basically do the fireball for every single player in the game. And obviously you can fire it to certain players within certain ranges, so you can make it so like if they're too far away, it doesn't fire to them, to kind of help with like performance and whatnot. I'm going to be showing you guys how to do all of that anyways. So alright, so this is the server side projectile module. It's basically, like I said, the exact same thing, except I'm going to be going through the code and showing you a little bit of the changes. First things first, we're not going to be using the onEnd function anymore. If you guys remember in part 1, we had a function called onEnd that we passed into the client module, which then we called from the client module. But now we don't want to use any callback function because it's not going to be necessary, since we're going to be handling the server and the client. So to begin, as you can see, this is the exact same thing. We're just taking in information and whatnot and spawning the part in. When I say spawning, I'm setting the position. You can see origin is equal to origin, position is equal to origin, etc. Right? Then what we do next is it's just like the module from part 1. We have the impulse, which just adds the impulse position. Then we have the create debug part, which just spawns a physical part just so I can actually see what the server is seeing. That's all. And then here we have the initial step, similar to the previous video, where it just does the initial step. And as you can see here on the server, we still do spawn a part, but like I said in part 1, you can use a spatial query like get parts bounds in box, etc. to see instead of actually spawning a physical part. But this initial step is just the same thing. And here we have the normal step, but as you can see here, it's just doing the exact same code, except here I'm just printing to the console server projectile hit something and then the position that it hit. And then here inside the cleanup method, as you can see, the cleanup is a little bit different. All I'm doing inside the cleanup method is I'm just deleting and disconnecting all the connections inside of it, but I'm not actually emitting any particles, because on the server you don't want to emit any particles because it causes a lot of lag. So let me close that and open up the init. As you can see, the init, I'm doing the exact same thing. It's so easy. I'm just applying the impulse. Then if I have an initial step, I use the initial step. Sorry, if the initial step fails, then I return. If not, then it does the step every frame. Then obviously when the step collides with something, it'll run the cleanup here, boom, and that's all that it does, right? So then this is a way you can handle it on the server. So after you do the cleanup, you can, instead of doing VFX, you can do like a hitbox, right? Like it hit something now. Okay, let's spawn a bigger hitbox. For example, it's traveling like this, then it hits this wall over here. We can then spawn a physical hitbox or a spatial query hitbox on the server. And the reason why you'd want to do that is because if you did it on the client could easily lie. For example, if I were to do the hitbox the way it currently is now, let's say I run the game and then I used, you guys can see here, right? This is the hitbox we're actually using here. If we were to copy this and paste it into workspace, you can see this is the physical side of the hitbox. So then, since I'm running on the client right now, what like the client could literally do is click on the hitbox and then change the scale of it like this to be massive. And then obviously they'll change the replicate storage. And if they do this now, this is the new hit detection for the hitbox. So let me actually go ahead and do that. So if I go here, I'll just increase the size to be huge. And now if I run it, it should use that new hitbox. As you can see, just instantly destroying because it's hitting the floor underneath because the hitbox is massive. And obviously you don't want the client to be able to change it. Obviously you could do on the server what we call sanity checks, which is where you check, for example, the range of the hitbox. So let's just say I would have hit this person here. It would check how close I am to the person to see if actually is a valid hit. But I still don't like doing hitboxes on the client unless you have good server side validation. All right, so as you guys can see, we've made some changes to the actual the local script. Because you guys remember before we handled everything on the local script. Now what we're going to be introducing is remote events. Remote events are basically ways for you as the client to communicate with the server. Because as we know, the server is running on Roblox's servers. It's not running on your device, meaning that you don't actually have any way to see what's going on the server. And the only way to communicate with the server is by sending information over the network via remote events or other networking modules that people may use. In this case, we're going to be using remote events. As you can see here, I'm firing a remote event to the server and I'm giving it an argument called fireball ability. So now if I were to go to server script service and I made a server script, I can reference a remote event like this. It's game storage remote event, and I can do remote event on server event connect to a function. So now the function takes in the player as a default parameter. So the player is always going to be the first parameter, but the second parameter or the third or however many extra parameters you can add is depending on how many you passed in here. You can see here I passed in one, so I'm just going to call it, for example, skill type. And I'm going to do if skill type is equal to, and then in this case, the skill type, we're checking if it's fireball ability. If it is the fireball ability, then we're just going to go into the console or using fireball. So now if I were to go into the game, and when I press Z, you can see the server now is running it and it says using fireball. So now we know the server knows that the client is trying to use the fireball ability. So what we're going to do next is play the animation on the server and then send information to the client to actually visualize what the server is creating, basically. All right, so we made some changes. As you can see, the first change we made was we made it so now the server plays the animation using the player's character, and obviously the player is passed in as the first parameter by default, so you don't have to actually pass in the player. Then we're just checking on the server when it reaches the animation event called spawn. Then when it does, we just warn to the console spawn VFX, and then obviously if it hits throw, we'll just warn to the console throw VFX. So now you can see here, if I were to do it now, and I press the fireball, it says throw VFX and spawn VFX at the right time. So obviously that's how we want it to be, because on the server like this, all we want the server to actually see is our player just playing the animation like this, and then the server will handle all the positions, but we don't want to actually see any VFX being handled on the server at all. So let's start that now. All right, so what we did now was we made another remote event inside of replicate storage and we called it effects. Basically, the reason why we did this is because we're going to be firing this remote event from the server anytime we want to basically show VFX on the client. So as you can see here, I just referenced it here. Then whenever we reach the spawn animation event, I'm basically sending the remote event to all the clients and I'm giving it an argument called fireball spawn. And then I'm passing in a table of data and the character is inside of that table of data. So you can see here now on the client effects, all I'm doing is I have a remote event reference here. Then when the remote is fired and the client receives it, I have the skill type and the data as arguments. And if the skill type is fireball spawn, then it does the fireball and it walls the fireball to the character's hand on the client. So now if I were to use this and I press the ability, you can see it spawns it the same way you used to spawn it before. But if I go to the server, you can see it doesn't show up on the server. But if I were to add like a second player, so I'll add like another account here, you will see that it will actually show for both players now. So I have to switch recorder, so it might be a little bit laggy, but as you can see now, if I were to press Z on this account here, you can see here on this account, it is showing the VFX that's there. And you can kind of see how the VFX is there on both sides of the screen. So now we're going to make it actually fire. And the way it's going to work is the server is going to have its own simulation of the projectile and the client will have its own as well. But the server will hold the true information, meaning that if the client somehow detected a collision that didn't really exist, the server will be able to verify it. And then the server will check if they actually if it collided, and if it did, obviously you can do your server side of the hitbox and whatnot. But we're just basically doing it on the client just to make it look nice, because we don't want to rely fully on the server, because, you know, it could be a bit like delayed and whatnot. So what I've done now is I made a couple of methods. I made a method to find VFX inside the active VFX table, and want to remove the VFX by the actual instance. So the reason why I did that is because when the server fires, it tells the user to fire the actual fireball. What I'm doing is I'm finding the fireball using the fireball's name underscore the character's name, because the way we store it is here. You can see I store the fireball inside of the table, but the name of the fireball is fireball underscore, then I use the character's name, and then that means I can easily find it. And if I do find it, then I destroy it. Well, I don't destroy it, I remove it from the table, only because let's just say they try to use the fireball again. If it's still in the table, it would cause some issues because they wouldn't know which fireball you're talking about. So that's out the way. Yeah, we remove from the table, but if the fireball doesn't exist for whatever reason, like let's just say the skill got cancelled, then it just returns, right? If the fireball doesn't exist, then we do the exact same thing for the weld. We find the weld, then if the weld is found, we destroy the weld, and then we remove the weld's instance. So we actually remove from the table. Then after that, it's the exact same thing as part one. We just fire the actual projectile on the client using the information from like the server and whatnot, which is just, you know, the character that we want to actually use. So here, if I were to run this now, as you can see, as you would expect, just like in part one, it works as expected. And if I go to the server and I use the ability, you can see the server still doesn't see anything here. It just sees the client just sees the information and whatnot. And if I were to add a second character again, the second character should be able to see the fireball, but we still need to do the server side where the server actually does its own little calculations and whatnot. All right, so we got the two characters in, as you can see. So if I use it on this account, you can see we can see it on both accounts now. I were to move it like this so you can see it better. Use it on this account, you can see there. Use it on both accounts. As you can see, they both work. And now we just need to make it so the server itself actually has its own version, because obviously we don't want to trust the clients to do the hitbox and the hit detection and whatnot. So the server is going to do its own calculation. Then when the server detects something, later on, if you want, you can add a hitbox or whatever. All right, so the final few changes we now made is made it so the remote, we call it skill remote, but the skill remote is just the same remote event that we use to communicate with the server from the input handler. Mind you, you should probably pick better names, because, like, you know, it's kind of getting annoying. But yeah, you can see here, whenever the client is ready to shoot out the VFX, I just send it to the server. And obviously this doesn't really matter if you're sending it to the server this way, because if there was like an exploiter, the only thing they could do is delete this, and if they deleted this, then it wouldn't really matter, because that just means that the projectile is not going to do any damage. And obviously you're going to want to do server side checks anyway. Check if it's not a cooldown, you know, check if you know, the position of the fireball is like close enough to the character. You're going to want to do all those kind of checks anyway to make sure that, you know, an exploit isn't just like, you know, trying to exploit it in any way possible. Anyway, so yeah, we fire it to the server here, as you can see, and then on the server, all we're doing is when we reach this event, sorry, on the server, all we're doing is when we receive the remote event, if the skill type here is fireball ability simulation, which is what we're passing in here, then all we're doing is we're unpacking the data that was sent from the client, or basically doing the exact same thing with the projectile. Except the reason why we do unpack is because if you notice here, when we send information like this, we're sending it in a table, which means that on the server it's going to receive it like this. For example, 1 is equal to something and 2 is equal to something, and we don't want that. So when you use unpack on a table, it basically removes the indexes, sorry, the keys, and then sets it to be like kind of like a list, like 1, 2, 3, instead of like 1 is equal to 1, 2 is equal to 2, you know, that kind of thing. And doing that, we're able to send it like this. So now if I were to run the game, you can see here, and I press the ability, it works. And you can see here the server, it hits something at that specific position. If I were to do it here, the server hits something at that position, and you can see its timing is good as well. Like boom, and the second it hits, the server hits something as well. And if I were to spawn in a part, and then you see the server hit something at this position, I'm gonna copy that position, and then I'll grab the part, and I'll change this part size first of all to be like small. I'll do 1 by 1 by 1. Then I'll change the size of the part's position to the position that the server detected, which is right here. You can see the part is there now. If I were to do the exact same thing again, you can see it lands just directly on that part there, as you can see, which means it's working correctly. And then obviously on the server side, you can do your hit detection, like hitboxes and whatnot. So yeah, if you guys would like to see a part 3, remember 200 likes, and in part 3 I'll be doing like bullet type raycasting. So like, you know, breakouts for like guns and whatnot. So yeah, if you guys are interested, 200 likes, and I got you guys with that. And without further ado, make sure you like, sub, well.